Good afternoon. I will call the April 4th meeting of the Board of Supervisors to order. It's 3 o'clock on my watch. The first item of business, Board, that we need to attend to is Mr. Pugh is out of town on a personal matter, yet he would like to participate by telephone. So I would make a motion that we allow Mr. Pugh to participate due to him being out of town on a personal matter. Is there any discussion on that? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And I vote aye. Next thing is the approval of the agenda. Board, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
All right, motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. All right, if you would rise and join us for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Prayer.
Let us pray. Heavenly and gracious Father, we thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you for this season. And Father, we thank you for the ability to assemble here to discuss the business of the county. Be with all of our men and women of the military as they are on foreign lands and here at home, protecting our liberties that we so enjoy. Be with all of our public safety, our fire, rescue, and our law enforcement as they provide this much-needed services for our community. Again, be with us as we move forward with the business of the county. Give us the strength, courage, and the wisdom to make decisions that are pleasing to you and beneficial to our community. It's in your name we pray. Amen.
Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the next part of our agenda is citizen comment. Is there anyone signed up to speak? All right, first person that's signed up is Mr. Andrew Proctor. Mr. Proctor?
Good afternoon. I'm Andrew Proctor. I'm speaking on behalf of the EDA today, and I handed out something there for you as well. Basically, what we wanted to do here is speak on behalf of the Gateway Sewer that you guys will be discussing. The EDA has spent the last 2 weeks reviewing the details of this project with all the various stakeholders because we want to make sure that we have a fresh view of everything it entails and fully evaluate the risks, opportunities, and the costs that come with it. We deem these discussions with stakeholders critical because both the opportunities and the costs we know are very significant. A transparent, collaborative partnership between the county, who would be establishing infrastructure, and the business community doing the commercial development is crucial to minimizing the risk and maximizing economic return for all the parties. I wanted to talk for a second here about the estimated cost, just to level set. The project is really broken into really 3 distinct but connected engineering activities. So the first 2 of those are the river line and the pump station, and those have an estimated cost of about $2.5 million, with about $1 million worth of funding identified for that. The third piece of that would be the sewer line extension that runs up the hill to the various properties on top of that, and that's an estimated cost of $1 million. So the funding balance that really is a big piece of this project is $2.5 million. The project will benefit many different groups over many years, and it really would be hard to attribute or to select any one party that would be benefiting from this specific one. I think with anything with a $2.5 million investment, I think it's important to take some perspective of the investment. This investment is multifaceted and low risk because it addresses immediate and future concerns of existing residents, enables proposed development to move forward, and sets the stage for additional development in the immediate and the surrounding areas. The investment is also practical because it's targeted for an area with an existing need, and there's proposed development on the table that would start generating return in the near future. There's no doubt the cost is significant, but we're virtually assured if we wait and we have to do this in a few years, it will probably cost even more then. The sticker shot is absolutely real, $2.5 million. but it's really relative if you think about what the cost is of doing a lot of these things these days. For example, it's about over $1 million to paint the county's water towers, and a car wash that was recently built here cost over $1 million. It's a good idea also to benchmark recent county investments to make sure that we're spending the money appropriately. Recently, the county invested about $400,000 in utilities to support the Phelps Road school development, which generated about $7 million in economic activity. So that's about a 5.7% investment on the county to generate that. For this particular investment, $2.5 million, there's at least $100 million worth of economic activity between the houses at the top of the hill that would connect and the parcels with proposed development and future development and the overflow to the other areas. And that's about a 2.5% investment to generate $100 million. How does this benefit the citizens of the county? So a couple of things to note here. One, it solves sewer problems for the folks that are residents along River Road. Two, it brings sewer within reach of the 60-odd homes off of Marymore that are on septic systems that are near the projected end of their lives. It extends a sewer line into area designated by the comprehensive plan as growth. And there's immediate proposed development activity that has a focus on senior housing, which county residents have told us that they need, and that county resident seniors are leaving the county for because we don't have it. There's also immediate development around along Route 163 and future development on Thomas and Kings Roads, which would add general housing close to downtown Lynchburg, which is continuing to experience strong housing demand and starting to running shorter on supply. The investment and growth in this area will increase the number of residents in the county's target area, and along with population in nearby downtown Lynchburg, will increase demand for the grocery stores, retail, restaurants, and all the service businesses up Business 29. This increase in population will also benefit our businesses who regularly tell us they have trouble finding labor. I know I'm running short on time, so.
You're over.
I'm over. All right.
All right.
Well, thank you very much, and we appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Proctor. Mr. Gordevier? Gordevier. I was close? All right, thank you. All right. If you would, state your name and your district, please.
Ray Gordonier. As far as the district goes, I'm not really sure. I think it's Courthouse District. I'm at 301 Windy Ridge Way.
Okay, sir, thank you.
Right? We had a road crew come up and cut the trees back on the side of the road earlier this year. And we were told that Windy Ridge Way would be hard surface this year. Evidently, it's supposed to be in 2025. I came down to check and see what the exact schedule is and to make sure that the schedule would be kept. I started petitioning for the road to be done in 2016 when I moved down here. I'm a resident down here in the county for like 7 years.
Sure.
First quarter mile of the road, the potholes are terrible. They're atrocious. The road is not curved. It is not crowned. The gutters are not maintained. All right, the ditches on the side of the road are not maintained. So the road gets wet and water stays on the road, so it develops a lot of potholes. The road needs a lot of maintenance. Easiest way to do it would be hard surface it.
Understood. So, Mr. Bryant, could you look into that?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, Windy Ridge Way is on the 6-year road plan that you're going to see today, and fortunately, we have Mr. Brown here from VDOT, so you picked the right meeting to come to.
I met him before. Nice gentleman. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank
Have a
you,
good
sir.
afternoon.
The next person is Mr. Marks. If you'd state your name and district, please.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is John A. Marks, Jr. I reside at 225 Clark Street, Madison Heights, Virginia, 24572. I would like to address item 6A of the agenda concerning the Gateway Sanitary Sewer Project. Based on the recommended actions presented in the agenda, it appears that the board is being asked to vote on either borrowing $2.5 million to complete the Gateway Sanitary Sewer Project or tell the developer that the county will not fund the Gateway project. It's my opinion for several reasons that the county should not fund the project without a formal commitment from the developer. First, I believe it establishes a terrible precedent. What does the board say to the next developer who walks in here and has an equal viable project? Second, later in this meeting, the board will be reviewing a report concerning the landfill that may require the borrowing of another $3.5 million. And third, it seems only reasonable that the developer has some stake in this endeavor. However, I believe there is another option that should be considered. The developer, in an email dated November the 2nd, 2022, stated, "For 1 year," and I quote, "we are projecting to sell between 15 to 20 senior villas and are projecting 75 to 100 apartments, then repeat until complete," end of quote. This same email projected that water and wastewater total annual revenue from this project after 3 years would be $278,955. The projected debt service on the loan is stated to be $177,000. It would seem reasonable that a written agreement between the developer and the county could be reached where the county borrows the money and handles the debt service for the first 3 years, after which the projected revenue should more than cover the debt service. However, should the project not build out as projected, and after 3 years the revenue from the project does not cover the debt service, then the developer will be responsible for covering the difference between the actual revenue and the debt service until revenue covers debt. This would not seem to place any upfront burden on the developer, but would provide some protection for the county. If the developer does not have enough confidence in the plan to agree to this, then why should the county have any confidence in the plan? And I would like my comments to be included in the minutes of this meeting, and I will provide the clerk a copy of these comments. And if the clerk sends me an email address, I will email the comments for inclusion in the minutes, and she can just hand them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marks. Ms. Davis, Christy Davis, if you would state your name and district, please.
My name is Christy Davis. I live at 307 Windy Ridge Way in Amherst.
Are you interested in pavement?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Countless times a year, we have to put in work requests with VDOT to fix several large potholes along our road. Many of these are so big, we have to try our best to maneuver our vehicles around them so we don't hit them. The most recent time we put in a work order, it took several attempts just to get someone out to fix our road. That's when we were also told that come spring, we would be getting a tar surface put down on our road. All of us were so excited to hear this and have been looking forward to this. They even sent out people to clear trees and other debris to make it easier to pave the road. Now we are being told that we are once again being put on the back burner. And also another issue that we're having right now is the dust. It's terrible. My kids can't go outside and play because if a car goes down the road, the dust is flying everywhere. Even when my children get on and off of the bus creates dust and it's flying around everywhere. They have to walk through that mess to get on and off of their bus. It's all over our vehicles, all over our homes, anything that's outside. Ask that you all please consider getting this done as soon as possible. Thank you all for your time.
Ms. Davis. MacArthur Page.
Good and we'll be discussing the road. I am a 20-plus year citizen of this road. Previously to most people sitting on this board, I was told by the Board of Supervisors here 20-some years ago that the reason that our road is not paved because it did not have any more houses. Then I found out later that it was never a plan, that the roads were just paved as people decided to pave them. And I know I'm not on the list as a good old boy or whatever, how the roads used to get paved. And I don't want to be disrespectful to the board, but we've been through this 20-some years, the same thing. And my biggest thing is, if we've been complaining about this and talking to people for this long, how did we get so far back on the 6-year plan? It makes you wonder, how did we get so far back on this plan? I mean, can anybody even answer me on this one? And speaking of everything said, and we call the State Department, and I seen 3 trucks ride down there this week. Nothing has been done, 3. And I know y'all not responsible for that. I know we have a guy that we need to talk to about that. And multiple times of the year, I have to get my truck aligned. I got a fairly new truck. It wears out the tires on the truck. And we were at the point one time where the State Department actually had pretty much lost the road. It was that bad. And we feel like we pay our taxes, and we just asking for a fair shake. I mean, that's it. I mean, I just put a new roof and everything on my house. It's supposed to be black. What color do you think it is? Dust. And you know, and I'm trying to be a good citizen here. But we need somebody to really step up and say, look, these people have been dealing with this too long. And every road around us has been paved. Every road around us since they started this project. And I'm going to digress with that, and thank you for hearing me out today. Y'all be blessed.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Is there anyone else present that would like to address the board? Yes, ma'am. If you would please state your name and district.
7 Windy Ridge Way. That's what I'd like to, I guess I'm in the, I think we voted the school. When we moved out, we were told also, we've been out there 6 years now, and we were told also that it was going to be paved the following year. That was 5 years ago that we've been told, and we're waiting. Got hopeful when they came out and cleared the road. Potholes get horrendous. Your car, no use in even washing it in your driveway. As soon as you pull out and you're 200 feet down the road, it's covered in dust. I don't know how the kids can play outside because I have to head in when the school bus just heads down the road. Much less, at the end of the road, we have a hunt club. So we've got people that love to speed up and down that road, and there's nothing but dust cloud, dust cloud, dust cloud. It is ridiculous. And every road around us is paved. Every single road around us is paved and been repaved since even I've been out there. So I would like to know why we're being delayed yet again. I would really like a legitimate reason, and I think we all deserve one. And you're welcome to come take a ride down our lovely road to see what we're talking about. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Mr. Morcom.
I'm Terry Morcom. I am one of the developers that will directly benefit from the Gateway project. Kind of introducing our family, our dynamic and everything. I've lived in Amherst County for 63 years now. My family has always lived in Amherst County. We've never lived or paid taxes anywhere but Amherst County. My parents started building homes in Amherst County in 1958. My aunt still lives in the second house my father built in 1958. They have developed, or I have been involved in developments. They are Holiday Acres, West Bethel, Marymore, Woodrow Court, Brandywine, Foxcroft, Royal Gardens, Forest Oaks, Fernwood, Pleasant Ridge, and Mill Race. Included in this, we have also built the majority of the homes in both Hans Hill and Poplar Grove. Not to mention how many houses we've built outside of that. That's our track record. That's our track record. That's our commitment to Amherst County. We have, I think, that's decades of developing in Amherst County. I also challenge anybody, I don't care who they are, anybody can stand up and find fault in any one of those 11 developments that we're referring to. Secondly, I'd like to state that since the passing of the zoning, I have had countless people come up to me and ask me when this project's going to start. Boy, we need it. Just a couple months ago, I was at the doctor's office just getting my annual physical, drawing blood. Somebody that lives in Marymore, directly contacted by this property, told me, I really fully support your project and I'd love to see this thing happen. My neighbor, his wife, has now had to go in an assisted living facility. And he is now having to drive 20 minutes to visit her on a daily basis. That's both ways, okay? So that's 40 minutes out of their day just to go and visit their wife. Also, I'd like to, just in the last year, these are all people that I am directly associated with that have left the county to find senior living facilities. Richard and Margaret Cooper, they now live at the Summit. Janet Hausman lives at Westminster. Les Irving is currently building a home in Lynchburg in the Blackwater Creek development over there. My Aunt Margie, the one that I just referred to, that my father built the second house, was in 1958. She is now at a Runt and Pratt facility at off of Grays Mill Road. She's 89 years old. Some of you in here know Wood Morecambe. Wood Morecambe is also in a Runt and Pratt facility on Candler's Mountain Road. Wood is a World War II veteran. He worked for the county as a policeman for I don't know how many years. Jimmy may know that better than anybody. But he is 96 years old. My parents, who are 86.
Could you wrap it up, please?
I'll wrap it up.
Thank you.
My parents, who are 86 years old, and tomorrow my father will be 89 years old. They currently live at their home, but they are spending, to visit both Wood and my Aunt Margie, they are spending the better part of a half a day just going to visit these people because we don't have that facility in Amherst County. We are simply looking at this as a partnership from our standpoint with the county. We're trying to do something positive for the county, for the seniors in the county. I also want to just make one quick point. We know what the value of this property is if we don't get sewage to it. That's And that's already been in front of this board. It was a landscaping proposal. It was a company that was going to grind stumps on that site. They were also going to sell mulch, and it didn't fit the image that this county wanted. So they turned that proposal down. My point to that is, we have something that we feel like is positive for the community. It's going to help with the growth of the community. It's going to provide housing for our seniors where they aren't leaving Amherst County to find a pathway elsewhere. But I want the county to know we're fully committed. We want this thing to move forward, and we think it's nothing but the gamble, as y'all may look at it, we feel like it's well worth it because we are in there gambling with you. A lot of people say we don't have any skin in the game. The assessed value of the property that we're sitting on today is approximately $400,000, and we've already spent $20,000 getting conceptual drawings and this thing to present in front of the county. And if anybody has any questions, please ask me now.
Thank you, Mr. Morcom. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board? All right, hearing and seeing none, board will move on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve this consent agenda as presented.
All right, there is a motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
for the record, can we show that I was not absent but tardy?
Sure.
Thank you.
Ms. Tucker was tardy. Very good. All right. But we knew you were here with us in spirit. Correct. Okay. Moving on, we will have a special presentation on the Gateway Sanitary Sewer Project by Mr. R.T. Taylor. Mr. Taylor.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for having me here again today. I've got a brief handout. It may look familiar to you. We've excerpted several pages that we had discussed in other settings or other board meetings. So while that's coming around to you, I'll just go through the background a little bit. You may recall earlier this calendar year, and even backing up into the fall of last year, the county and the authority let us know that there was this potential project for the Gateway Sanitation Sewer Project, as well as we were gearing up to, thank you, doing interim financing for the authority's raw water intake project. So what we did was, contemporaneous to both projects, we issued a bank RFP at the end of the calendar year and got bids back on January 12th. You all may recall we presented how those bids came in, and Webster Bank was the selected proposer with a fixed rate for a 3-year ban at 3.76%. During the process, the county indicated that we wanted to hit pause on the sanitation sewer district to work on some clarifications. We let Webster Bank know, and they were just happy to proceed with the raw water intake project at $7.5 million at that 3.76%. Again, that's a 3-year note. We closed on that March 8th. And in the meantime, we asked Webster Bank, would you please hold your proposal open and not walk away, basically? And we asked a couple of the proposers if that would be the case. Webster Bank did agree that they had already put you through the credit underwriting process. They were happy to do the loan, even if the $2.5 million followed later. They just might have to refresh the rate. So recently, county staff asked us to go back to Webster Bank and say, okay, we may be on the move again for the Gateway project. What would the refreshed rate be? Okay, now the market's bounced around quite a bit, but they refreshed their rate at 3.98. Okay, so if we were looking at 3.76 a couple months ago, which would produce annual estimated interest on a note at $94,000 a year, the 3.98 provides roughly $99,500 a year, okay? So not $5,500 is what's ticked up over the past couple months, okay, 22 basis points. And so if you turn with me real quickly on page 2, and I'm going to skip around a little bit, just want to keep you posted on the bank process. If y'all wanted to decide to move forward with the Gateway Sanitation Sewer Project and needed to put the interim funding in place to get the project underway so the developer could get started, again, Webster Bank would be willing to move forward at 398, and they would hold that firm for a closing to occur on or before May 12th. So they're giving us that interest rate as of last week. They're willing to hold it for roughly 45 days. Okay? And on the chart at the bottom of page 2, just to give you, again, some perspective on what the debt service would be. Again, the interim note is interest only for 3 years, and the balloon maturity would be taken out at some date ahead of March 2026. You would pay annual interest roughly of $99,500. And then the current estimate for the long-term financing that would take out that balloon maturity would be roughly $177,000 a year if we were to price the bonds today on a long-term basis over 20 years. Or we ran a couple sensitivities just to see what the potential risk would be if the market were to move, 50 basis points or 100 basis points. You can see that on lines 11 and 12 of that page 2. Your principal and interest payments combined for 20 years would be $185 or $193. So somewhere between $175 and $200,000 for 20 years. Okay? So that's to just give you a look again. If you want to move forward, Webster Bank is still willing to move forward with the loan on an interim basis. The interest rate is 398, and that's just shy of $100,000 in interest each year. Now, since we'd be closing partially through fiscal year 23, really your interest would kick in next fiscal year. Okay? Any questions on the bond anticipation note specifically for the Gateway project?
Or
Okay. Sure. So y'all also may recall that part of our discussions early on in the planning process, and I'm just flipping back to some goals and objectives on page 1 before going to the other pages. We discussed creating a service district, which is done quite often for specific developmental areas where anybody that's currently there now on the $400,000 assessed value, you're paying your regular 61 pennies on your real estate tax dollars. So you take 400,000, you divide it by 100, you multiply it by the 61 pennies, that's your tax bill. What the service district does is it encourages, obviously, if you're looking to invest as a county into a specific area, you have the ability, the flexibility to set up this, call it a utility switch. And at any given point in time, if things get delayed or don't come to fruition, you could flip the switch on. If you never flip the switch on, that's your prerogative. You don't have to charge another penny or 10 pennies or whatever the preferred rate would be to help offset some of those costs that you're investing in if the development were to never happen. If it slows down and you're still getting monies in, great, right? But you might need a little bit more to help offset that. That is totally up to the county board of supervisors, whether that switch, the utility switch, ever gets turned on or when you turn it off, okay? So for example, if development is delayed or starts progressing at a slower rate, the developer may have to, if you flip that trigger, pay additional real estate tax dollars on the value that's being developed. But if businesses and residents are moving into that, they would also pay that incremental above the 61 base pennies, okay? So just to give you some input on how that system, if you chose to sort of provide yourself a lever to help offset some of those costs, if your investment is not sort of panning out the way it wanted to be, the way you wanted it to be. So Again, you don't ever have to activate it or pull that switch, but that was one concept that we had discussed a while back that just wanted to be mindful of. So if you have any questions on that or want to walk through any more of the presentation, I'm happy to do so. There are several, there's several bullets on the overview page of a service district on page 3. I'd like to just highlight again the second main bullet, flexibility. It gives you the option to help offset your investment risk. It doesn't mean you have to pull the trigger. It doesn't mean you have to charge an additional fee. It just gives you that option if someday down the road that were to be the case. That's the only one I really wanted to highlight on that page, but anything else?
Board, do you have any questions for Mr. Taylor before I get him?
Is this the end of him talking, or?
Oh, is this the
are you
end of you
going
talking?
more?
This is the end of me talking.
Okay.
I really didn't want to go belabor each page. You've seen a lot of this information before. Actually, you've seen just about every number on these pages before. I just had them for, in case we got into questions and wanted to talk through some examples or anything, it would be helpful guidance.
One quick question, because I'm quick and you're not. So, my quick question is this. I mean, this seems to be pretty
Ms. Tucker
straightforward to
tardy.
me. But
I'm
has,
sorry, I got stuck on Mr. Martin.
I'm sorry.
I
was marking
apologize.
you tardy again. Go ahead, I'm so sorry.
as I said,
Yes,
this
ma'am.
seems to be pretty straightforward to me, but I'm not the one holding the money doing the development. Has this been shared with the developer, or is he learning about this as we're learning about it?
I mean, I've shared this with the developer, this concept?
Yes.
Yes.
Have we received any feedback from the developer?
Mr. Markham, I'll let you speak to that, if that's okay, Ms. Tucker.
Thank you.
Are we referring to it being a service district? Is that what the question is?
Correct.
Okay, so when I was presented with that idea, the only thing I pointed back out, we're trying to do this for seniors, and it just felt like that wasn't a fair way to tax their seniors more because they happen to be in the service district. So that was their response to that. I mean, I know everybody knows how seniors operate, and a few pennies here and a few pennies there. Sometimes they don't react the way that maybe you or I may react. I mean, we know it's not that impactful to that district, but that was their response to it. I'm not going to sit here and say that we're in opposition of it. We just came back with the fact that we're dealing with a service district that we're trying to provide senior housing in.
I don't think I get the answer to my question. And I
Okay.
probably didn't phrase it very well.
Okay.
So how would that impact you as a developer? So if you're moving forward and then something happens and you can't, your economy goes bad, whatever, and you stop work, and then the tax would go up, how does that impact you as a developer? Or is it just the cost of doing business with you?
Well, I don't know that, I mean, this part of it is new to me. I don't really know how impactful that is to us. I know that saddling us with a bond issue for $2.5 million may hamper our ability to go borrow money when we're trying to borrow the money to proceed forward with the development. As far as, and unfortunately, I mean, everybody in this room, I think, understands that nobody knows what this economy is going to do. I mean, we have high hopes that it's going to be okay. And there's been some life in the economy in the last few months. We're getting some phone calls. They sort of dried up when they kept bouncing interest rates. So I mean, hopefully, it's not going to be impactful. The one good thing about this being a senior living project also, a lot of times the seniors aren't necessarily borrowing money to move into this type of a facility either.
Thank
So
you.
we would hope it would proceed forward, not be a problem.
Mr. Chairman, I'll save the balance of my questions for later.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Morcom.
thank you.
Did I answer that?
You did. Thank
Okay.
you.
Mr. Wade, any thoughts, questions?
Not yet. I got some, but I'll save them.
Bears? Mr. Pugh, any questions for Mr. Taylor?
Well, just a general question. I know there's been a lot of talking of the senior facility, but a large portion of the front of the development is apartments. Is that correct? Isn't that a big portion of the potential development?
That's correct.
All right. How many units are they projecting?
Senior villas,
Apartments.
apartments, we had 276 based on some prior information provided by the.
76 in our analysis.
Thank you.
More questions, Mr. Pugh?
No, sir.
Just to answer that, the whole project is roughly 650 units. So it's,
I think he was specifically asking there for market.
right, the market apartments are 276 is what is proposed.
All right, anything else, Mr. Pugh?
I'll wait.
Okay, so what is the property assessed at now?
Roughly $400,000. If you turn to page,
Okay, $400,000,
yes, sir,
61
page
cent.
6.
So the tax bill is what?
Bear with me. Total assessed value, excuse me. Let's see, we're looking at 368. I think I, 368,900 times 161. Right now, the annual property tax on the 368,900 is 2250 a year.
2250.
Yes, sir.
We
At
added
the
10
61 pennies.
And if you added 10 cent, I mean, it'd still be under 3, right?
100 divided by 0.10 times, $370 a year.
Right. You're not gonna recoup $2.5 million if he just sits on it, right?
Correct.
So,
But-
this is, all right, so a couple other questions. So, let's take this project and let's set it aside, okay? And we're looking at anywhere from $99,500 in debt service payment for 3 years, and then it could be long-term financing anywhere from $177,000 on the low end to, let's just call it $200,000 on the high end, right?
Yes, sir.
Just for easy math. So let's set that over here. As far as the county's overall health in our debt service payments, you know, in the coming years, how does this affect that? I mean, you know, we've got our debt, we've talked about this before, it's kind of coming down.
Right.
Hopefully. We throw this on top of it with the roughly, was it 19 million for the schools? Basically I'm asking, is this gonna hamper the county long-term?
So Stacy's been working on the budget for the upcoming year. There might not be challenges that we've been made aware of for the '24 budget year going forward. But based on the work we've done previously, y'all are in good shape from a fiscal health perspective, meaning debt capacity, debt affordability. But if Stacy would like to address the question specifically as it relates to.
And I'd also like to add, she'll probably address this, but Stacy has budgeted $100,000 in preparation for this,
For the next 3 years?
the next 3 years.
Okay, thank you. You anything?
That's all I was gonna say, and that you would be able to work with this next year when we reevaluate the taxes on the personal property.
Oh, right, okay.
Because we're
Thank
gonna
you.
do something permanent probably then at that point, so.
All right, so I have a couple other thoughts. So if you go to your page 4, and you state, "The Gateway project is anticipated to be funded initially through an interim financing note with a maturity of approximately 2 to 3 years in order to kickstart the project and allow time for details to evolve prior to funding on a permanent basis," right?
Correct.
So let's say the board says, you know what, Mr. Morcom, we really want to partner with you. We want to move this forward. We're going to go out and we're going to put the funding in place, mechanisms in place, and we go out and we start doing design, which, you know, by the time we do all of this, I would think design's probably going to be a year down the road, right? So let's say we get the design and Mr. Morcom hasn't done anything. You haven't proceeded with your plans, you haven't done your, I believe there's traffic studies that need to be done, there's site planning that needs to be done. What if we just said, hey, well, you know what, Mr. Morcom, you haven't done anything, you sat on it, we've designed this. Do we have to move forward with building it? How does that work?
Well, that's up to you. At that point, you've obviously spent some of the bond proceeds on the,
Yeah, but we haven't spent $2.5 million.
correct.
Spent some design money and
Understood.
we've done some debt service on it.
You can pay it off. Remember, the way Webster Bank set it up is that you could prepay it after that 1-year anniversary of the note. So if a year goes by and nothing's being done, and you wanted to just prepay the note and your sunk cost was $100,000 in design or whatever it was, that's what you're covering, you pay the note off. You don't have to do a long-term financing to do it. You just take the bond proceeds that you have remaining, use that to close the loan out, plus your county dollars from reserves.
Okay. My other thought, thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Unless there's some other commitment that you've entered into with contractors, that would be one thing you want to be mindful of.
Sure. Always looking for an out, I guess. But I guess the other way I'm looking at this, a year or so ago, 2 years ago, however it is, we took $1 million of ARPA money and set it aside for this project, right? So, to me, looking back in fairness, I think we kind of gave a commitment to it, or at least a really strong nod to this project that we were going to do it. And then it came back, and obviously it's more expensive, but yeah, I guess where I'm at right now, Mr. Morcom, just to give you, is, you know, if we move forward, you should be moving forward too.
That's their intent.
So,
We knew if we knew what y'all's decision were, we would be doing traffic studies currently. We've actually made contact with, I can't remember their name, but they're out of Roanoke for the traffic studies and
could you come to the mic, please?
I was just saying, we've made contact with some people out of Roanoke. I can't remember their names right now because this was quite a while back. It was back when y'all approved the zoning changes. We made contact with someone to do the traffic studies and got some rough estimates on what we thought that would be for cost. And I know at the same time, I think the county was doing a traffic study with somebody else, which I can't remember who that was, and we were thinking possibly about reaching out to them as well. I don't know where those traffic studies were, but.
Thank you, Mr. Morcom. Mr. Wade, anything now?
When I look at this, you know, this is a county infrastructure issue. And we already know we've got some other areas that have issues of their own. I could see a trickle down effect going on here. So we do this for him, then the other developers say, hey, we need this favor as well. I'd say I'm open to the ad valorem tax, but I'm hesitant right now, so keep talking.
Harris?
I reckon the question we must ask ourselves is, where is the guarantee? And I think we've tossed it up and down quite a few times. I reckon we as a board and we as a community, I don't know how many times all of us have heard, we never do anything. No one ever sees anything going on in the county. There's nothing new. There's nowhere from seniors and on, that we never do anything. And I don't know how we as a board, nor the developers come to an agreement, and I understand the bonding issue with them if they, take out a bond to create the security that, that diminishes their ability to do their borrowing to develop. Mr. Martin, I definitely follow along with you if, we commit to this and we get our study done and they have done nothing, not done a thing or moved forward or making steps as far as this project to move forward. I mean, I think that's fair enough. If we make the commitment, because I think that's what they've been looking for, is a commitment from us that we will get the infrastructure that's needed to handle this development. It's no doubt we need this development in our county. I'm one and I can speak to it. I got a mom that's 84 years old and my sister and I are struggling because she absolutely will not leave her home because she's not going out of Amherst County where she's been for 84 years. So I know firsthand how it is, and it's tough to get home care to take care of someone. It is really tough. So, that's my feeling. And we know the numbers say that we are an aging community. We know that. And these folks, we go generations back, have taken care of a lot of us as we've moved forward and grown up. And I think it's a time that maybe we need to look at, what are we going to do to take care of our seniors that have paid taxes their entire life in that county and then forced in the last days of their life to have to go in another jurisdiction and live out their last days. I think it's pretty tough. And not only does this project going to serve this potential development, but what does it do for the additional properties around there? It is in a growth area. It is right on top of the hill above downtown Lynchburg that is busting at the seams with development. Is there any other area in the county that we should see infrastructure go into and push for property to be developed than this? I don't think so. And if this 47 acres is developed, Murray Moore subdivision, which is one of our older subdivisions in the community, does not have to struggle for any more if their septic systems go to failing. Because back in those days, the lots weren't designed enough for additional septic systems to be installed. So what are they going to do? River Road they are dealing with some issues there now. So, we're not looking at just this particular developer providing them with infrastructure. We're doing this for several properties and a lot of residents that live in that particular area. So I think if that's the approach, Mr. Martin, I support you 100%. If we do our first steps we need to do, and as long as they're getting their first steps along the way, then we kind of work this together. So we're not, that's my feeling. Because I don't think we can find a 100% guarantee any way we look.
Okay, Mr. Wade?
From a Lynchburg perspective, how does Lynchburg or Campbell County handle these types of developments?
It varies, it really does. Sometimes it's handled through Economic Development Authority that helps fund some infrastructure improvements. Sometimes there are special agreements, memorandum of understandings that are put into place, kind of like tax increment financing, but it really varies. I guess my point on the special district, what I was getting at is, if we put that in, we put a 10 cent on it, and he doesn't do anything. You're only talking about 378 or whatever it was more dollars a year. That's really not going to fund anything. So I think what we would like to do is to move this forward in partnership, right? We're moving forward with the design and of the infrastructure while he's moving forward with the design of the site and all the studies that are necessary. I mean, we put the zoning in place for it, right? And we keep in communication with each other and get it going. Yep. So I think what staff is looking for is either, yes, move forward with drafting the resolutions and the support agreements for our consideration at the April 18th meeting, or just saying that we're not going to fund it. So that's really what's before us. Mr. Ayers talked about assurances. There's really two assurances that I was always told, death and taxes, and there's a third one today that Mr. Brown's going to talk about, Windy Ridge Road, later, right? What's your pleasure? Does anyone want to make a motion one way or the other and then debate it?
Mr. Martin?
Yes, sir.
All right, before you make a motion or anything, I agree that the project is viable. It's a good project. It's something that a lot of people have discussed that they would like to see in the county. I think the original $1 million, though, was going down to an issue on River Road, and at that time, we looked at a possible extension to go up to this property, and that is some of the additional funding that was required. So I think your premise is partially correct. I think this was added on at a later time. I may be wrong, but that was my understanding.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I mean, I just wanted to speak on this project. You know, I heard from Mr. Marks earlier, and he made some excellent points. You know, this is a guy that's been on the board, served, I don't know, 8 years on the board, the school board, various other boards throughout the county. He's highly respected. He doesn't come shooting from the hip. I've never heard him do that, so I respect his opinion greatly. But as this is written, I can't support it. There's really no surety for the county whatsoever on this project. We are essentially taking a gamble on the $2.5 million to run this project. And yeah, I've looked through it. A cost share agreement would certainly be a good thing. The item that Mr. Marks brought up, we would initially fund it, and then within 2 or 3 years, the taxes on it would be able to fund the project and pay the debt service. Something of that nature that's in writing or MOU, I would be able to support. But I think this is going to set a terrible precedent if we move forward, because there are other developers that will come forward or may come forward with plans to develop properties, and they'll spend some money on an engineering firm to come in here and go through the special exception process. And what do we do then? Do we have a process set forward, or we just choose on a case-by-case basis? So that's my biggest concern, is going forward, the implications that this is going to have. And I just say it now, as it is written, I cannot support it. And that's all.
Okay, understood. Yeah, I don't want to keep belaboring the fact, but I think one of the main things that changed my mind about this was a conversation I actually had with Mr. Proctor. Where'd he go? Oh, hey, buddy. You know, if you look at the line, and you're right about the ARPA money and putting that line on, the major cost associated with this, I believe, is the line on River Road, right? Which, you know, I think we could debate is or would be needed regardless of this project, right? So that kind of helped me in my decision-making process. So is there anyone that would like to make a motion one way or the other?
I'll move that the board direct staff to prepare the resolution and the support agreement with Amherst County Service Authority for the financing of the Gateway Sanitary Sewer Project for action at the April 18th meeting.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Mr. Wade. Is there any other discussion? If not, please signify. I'm calling for the vote. So those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Those in opposition?
Aye.
So that's a no, right? You're voting
Oh,
against.
excuse me, I'm sorry, that's a nay. Pardon me.
So the motion passes 4-1. All right? We will see you back on the 18th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next thing on the agenda is landfill cell 2 transfer station presentation by Mr. Mann, Mr. Dick, and Mr. Thacker.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Bob Dick. I'm with SCS Engineers. I'm a senior vice president with SCS, and I've been working for Amherst County as a solid waste consultant for approximately 3 years, working for Brian at the landfill and on other solid waste engineering and consulting projects. I have with me today Ryan Mann, one of the project engineers. We're both out of the Richmond, Virginia office. I've been doing solid waste engineering in the Commonwealth of Virginia for about 33 years, and Ryan's been with us for about 6 years now. And what we were engaged by the county to do was what I'll term a comparative analysis of expenses that would be associated with 2 different means or strategies to handle solid waste management in Amherst County. So we call this a financial analysis, but a couple things that it's not a pro forma cash flow analysis. It's not a revenue sufficiency analysis. It essentially addresses the probable and likely expenses that the county would incur for managing the solid waste in 2 different methods or strategies. And throughout our presentation today, one of those methods is referred to as transfer station, in which you're transferring the waste that's received at the facility. And I know you folks are familiar that you have a transfer station. Consider, as we talk today about the expenses associated with the transfer station, the primary elements of that are your transportation cost, the fuel, equipment, vehicles, and labor associated with moving the waste to another location other than where it's been placed for several decades there at the existing county landfill. And then the tipping fee that you would owe in bringing your waste to another permitted solid waste disposal facility. So that kind of sets the frame of reference for the transfer station scenario. The landfill scenario, in which we're evaluating, again, a comparative analysis of the expenses associated with that strategy, does not have those elements. They're not relevant in landfilling. You're neither transporting or long hauling the waste, and you're not paying a tipping fee to somebody else's solid waste disposal facility for the privilege of disposing of your waste there. However, what you are incurring is costs associated with the capital expense with cell development and closure. And so, you know, the financial analysis, again, I use the term a comparative analysis of expenses that SCS performed on behalf of the county, is looking at the estimated probable expenses that are likely to be incurred during a 13-year period that doesn't commence until 2028. So when you're looking at our presentation today, we have both annual expenses outlined in terms of the first year of choosing one of the 2 scenarios, but you'll notice that that doesn't happen until the year 2028. And the reason that is because for approximately the next 4 to 5 years, there's no change in the status quo anticipated. The landfill has existing sufficient capacity to continue operating in the baseline status quo condition for approximately 4 years or so. So that's why the 13-year period or duration covers 2028 through 2040. There's a substantial degree of detail in our financial modeling. It was fairly sophisticated. Today, we plan to summarize and kind of highlight the modeling that we did from an output standpoint. We don't intend to belabor each and every parameter that's part of an equation, although we're certainly available throughout our presentation or afterwards to bring clarity or additional commentary on some of the parameters, assumptions that were used. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague. First, I guess, I'll identify these 4 scenarios that were relevant for us in this comparison. The first is to cease and discontinue the practice of solid waste disposal at the existing landfill and instead transferring the waste to Brunswick Waste Management Facility. So that is an actual permitted solid waste disposal facility in Lawrenceville, Virginia, and utilizing county employees to haul the waste there. And then the second scenario is just a twist on that one. It's, again, to discontinue solid waste placement and close the landfill cell 1, and then transfer the waste to the Brunswick Waste Disposal Facility through the transfer station, your existing facility, but outsourcing the trucking and hauling of that to a third party. Scenario 3 is to essentially commence with a landfill cell 2 development, so to stay in the landfilling business at the existing site and maintaining the existing transfer station open for all residential and commercial customers, and then the hauling of this waste that's delivered to the transfer station is obviously a very short distance. It's on the same site, and so you're just moving the waste that's received at the transfer station. The 4th scenario, again, keeps in that same basic strategy of being in the landfilling business. You're not engaged in any long hauling to another disposal facility, but you would convert the existing transfer station into what's referenced as a citizens convenience center as opposed to operating it as a transfer station. And there's a little bit of a nuance there that we'll explain. And again, that's so basically 2 primary methodologies: transfer station, long hauling, and landfilling, with a distinctive twist to each one that enables us to have a sub-scenario. With that, I'll let Ryan take over.
Chairman, do you want to hold questions to the end or as they go?
How would you like to do that?
We're fine entertaining questions
Tucker,
as we
go
go
ahead.
along.
Go back a slide, please.
Try using the wheel. See if the wheel works.
My question is between option 3 and 4. Is the difference because option 4 would not include commercial waste? I'm not seeing that nuance that you're talking about.
Yeah, so the distinction there is the manner in which you have the existing facility permitted and operating. And so it's not so much that the types or materials of waste can't be accepted. It would just have to be that all waste that cannot be placed in an open-top container, like a citizens convenience center typically has, would have to be delivered directly to the landfill, what we call the working face of the landfill. And so it's the difference between scenarios 3 and 4 isn't so much about the facility not accepting or accepting any type of difference in materials. It's really comes down to a staffing issue as far as how the labor, the personnel assigned to what we're going to keep calling the transfer station, but if it's being operated as a convenience center from a permitting standpoint, that allows
So
the
it's
labor
is
to
it a
be
licensure
repurposed.
issue?
in
Okay.
essence.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Did they look at the fact of just closing the transfer station completely down and not using that at all? Was that that is an option, but I don't know if it's in the actual documents.
So complete closure or mothballing, if you will, of the existing transfer station was not considered in any of the four scenarios. In all four of the different scenarios, some degree of waste management activity occurs at that existing facility.
Okay. All right, if you move forward, please.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. As Bob said, I'm Brian Mann, been with SCS Engineers for about 6 years, and I've been working with Brian since 2020 at the Amherst County landfill. So I ran through this model that we put together to put this analysis together, and we focused on two main outputs for each of the scenarios. That was the cost, and each item is a cost for the county. And the first number will be your first year expense, that 2028 expense, whether you're closing the landfill cell 1 or you're opening landfill cell 2. And then the second number is your total cost over the 13-year life. And that 13-year comes from what we assume to be the life of cell 2 based on our estimates. So in this first slide, I provided at the bottom the numbers, the comparative numbers that we put together based on assumptions and calculations that we did and in conjunction with the county to give us the best comparison of each individual scenario. So this number represents the cost to Amherst County in fiscal year 2028 when the life expectancy of cell 1 is assumed to be over, when you would have to make the decision, do we just go to transferring or do we open up cell 2? And so the rest of the presentation, I will explain how each of these numbers is formed, the different subtotals that we've created, and then how each of those items and the assumptions that we put together to create each of those numbers. So each scenario uses the same basic assumptions. The assumed waste intake rate, whether it's for the transfer station or landfill for either scenario, is 124 tons per day, about 38,200 tons per year. That number is based on the 2022 tonnage, which was approximately 39,500 tons, but 38,000 of that through the landfill. That wasn't yard waste that was burned off. So these are items that came through the transfer state or came through the scales at the site, and in the transfer station scenario would ultimately have to come back out and go somewhere else. This tonnage, we increased this tonnage from an original assumption of 32,000 based on this previous year, and the assumption that the tonnage coming into the landfill will actually stay up about that high based on construction and development in the area and the number that we got from this past year. And then in the transfer station area, we have an additional assumption, hauling costs. So the Brunswick tipping fee, which, as Bob stated, is one of the items that drives that cost for the transfer station, and that's the cost that you'll be paying per ton to transfer the waste out of your county or into another landfill. And so the Brunswick tipping fee of $19.28 comes from a cooperative procurement with that site, and that was provided to us by the county. And then the hauling distance to that site is 240 miles round trip, about 119 miles one way, which in and of itself adds cost between the number of trucks required and the hauling distance in terms of time to get back to the site. The initial assumption we made was actually transferring to Amelia County, which is significantly closer, but without the cooperative procurement agreement, you would be paying a tipping fee of about $35 per ton which seems to be on average if you were to go anywhere else other than Brunswick with that agreement. You'd be paying upwards of $35, in some cases $45 to $50 per ton, and that price gets significant quickly. Throughout our analysis, all prices that we show, they are inflated by an average 3% per year. This is just an average assumption we made for every cumulative, every year following 2022, which when we got all these numbers. And then the landfill cell 2 scenario includes the functioning transfer station, as we've already stated. So some of the items for equipment and labor include a working transfer station, or in the convenience center case, the equipment and personnel needed to run the convenience center. And so I guess for the bottom of this, I believe all of you have seen these numbers. The lowest number here is the landfill cell 2 with the convenience center. That number comes down mostly just due to a difference in labor, salaried operators versus part-time convenience center workers. But you can see there's about $1 million difference between that first year transfer station cost and then the landfill cell 2 cost. Does anyone have any questions before I move to the next slide?
Any questions, Mr. Pugh?
No, sir.
Okay.
All right, and then most of these items are the same as what I've already stated. Again, the assumptions run through. It's just now we've put a cumulative cost for the lifespan of that cell 2. We use that lifespan because that would be the only, those would be the only years that it would be necessary to compare the two options. Once cell 2 would close, you would have to go to the transfer station as it's built on the area of cell 3. So these numbers are the same, the assumptions are the same. We've added each number at the bottom here, and then all of this includes what we assume as equipment costs over that 13-year period, which I will go into later. And again, there's only about a $3 million difference between the transfer station in-house trucking scenario and then the landfill cell 2 transfer station. And then the landfill cell 2 convenience center option is closer to $4 million difference over the life.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yet, you say that, yet you're assuming that the tipping fees and trucking costs stay static over that 13 years, right?
With an inflationary increase,
but
yeah.
we have no control over tipping fees, right?
Correct, yeah. The agreement could go up
As much as they want.
I don't know what the exact agreement is, but there is, I would assume there is a term, and there's probably a inflationary increase, and then after that term, they could go to $50 if they wanted to. You're kind of at the whim
Right.
of the landfill that you are transferring to.
Okay, thank you.
And again, so that scenario, that 1928, that is the lowest we could possibly find. Anything else would be much greater. And so these are those numbers broken down into their subtotals. So for the transfer station, in that first year, you would have to close cell 1, which we've estimated to be about $3.7 million to close that. That includes the final cap, any erosion and sediment control, stormwater management, or any items that need to be put in to completely close cell 1. The operations and maintenance cost, fueling and maintenance of vehicles, but most of that comes from labor and salaries. Equipment, so as soon as you go to being a full transfer station, you will have to get new tractors and new trailers because the amount that you'll be shipping out per day would be about five loads per day. That assumption is based on 21 tons per trailer. If you get about 24 124 tons per day, you have to make at least about 5 trips. And so you would have to have at least 5 tractors and 5 trailers, probably more than that, in order to make the required number of trips based on the amount that you have to haul it, which is 240 miles. And then the hauling and truck cost, that's 240 miles per trip, and we assumed about $3.25 per gallon for fuel. That is low for what diesel fuel is right now, but looking at the last 10 years, it's about average. And then the tipping fee, as we said, that was an assumed $19.28, but in the year 2028, obviously raised for inflation 3% per year from that number that was given in 2022.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
how many trips per day, every day, did you assume this, estimate this to be?
5 trips, it would be, each trailer holds about 21
Per
tons
day or
of
per
waste.
week?
Per day.
I'm sorry?
Per day,
Per day,
yeah.
okay.
And with the estimated time to do 240 miles round trip and unload the waste, it's about 4.5 to 5 hours. So for any one of those tractors and trailers to do it twice, you would be going into an area where you're paying a driver overtime, and you run the risk of not getting that load out in time if something were to go wrong. So really, you would need 5 drivers and 5 tractors plus any wiggle room you could get, but that's at a minimum based on our assumption. Does anyone have any questions on these numbers? The only other addition in the total is the post-closure care. So those are the items you're required to do year over year once you close the landfill. That's not a fixed amount, but it is an amount that will be required no matter when you close the landfill. Does anyone have any additional questions?
Ayers, Mr. Pugh? Okay, so you're not looking for the board to do anything at this point. The way I see it, 2028, is that when an absolute decision, well, obviously
No.
prior to that, but,
That is our rough estimate based on the tonnage coming in and the assumed density and, your final grades. It's a calculation for the future that we estimate.
so if I remember correctly, we went out and built this facility, right? And it came to the board, I think we were asked to approve 2 more positions because it was essentially a transfer center to ourselves. And we were like, well, what if we turn it into a convenience center? How are we operating it right now? As a convenience center?
It's
or-
operated as a convenience center, but not so much. It's a hybrid, because a convenience center cannot take commercial traffic. So right now, we're sending commercial traffic there because it is permitted as a transfer station and then hauling it to the landfill. So it's not a convenience center, it's not really a transfer station either, because we're not transferring it out.
May I think an important point to make is that we have 2 individual permits right now. We have a DEQ permit for the landfill, we have a DEQ permit for the transfer station. So we have certain minimum requirements which dictate which staffing we need at both facilities. Which I believe Ron's going to get into that.
Yeah, that's a later slide about the labor required at each one, but we can move it forward as you all would like. The next 4 slides just go through the totals of each scenario, and I'll just go through the differences. The outsourced trucking, the only difference between this and the last was that the county would not hire full-time drivers, so therefore you would not be buying the equipment or the drivers, but you would be outsourcing that. And the estimate we got from a local trucking company was about $700 per trip. So that price greatly exceeded what you would be taking on if you just did the trucking in-house. We wanted to show that, but when you look at the numbers, it's, especially over the entire course, it's about 10 to $15 million more expensive to outsource that trucking, just because you're looking at about $1.8 to $2 million a year just on the trucking cost. So the landfill cell 2 with the transfer station. So in this case, you would not close cell 1. When you build cell 2, you actually piggyback the waste back on top of it. So you wouldn't close that cell, but you would have to construct cell 2, which would be its own construction cost. We've assumed to be about $1.25 million, or $3.25 million, excuse me. The estimate that we've made here is for a transfer station and a landfill. So now you have 4 landfill operators, 2 transfer station operators, and a swing operator, and then you have your convenience site drivers picking up from the convenience center and bringing to the site. The equipment, so the assumption here would be that in that year when the cell 2 opened up, a new compactor would have to be bought, and that is an expensive piece of equipment. And so as Bob mentioned, the expense for the landfill scenario comes in capital costs. Equipment and heavy-duty equipment used on top of the landfill is not cheap. And then the items over on the total cost, the 2028 to 2040. So the 7.5 million, that would, at the end of the cell 2 life, you would have to close both cells. The cell 1 is about 13.6 acres, and I believe cell 2 is 6.3 or 4 acres. So you'd have to close all of that once you're finished, assuming about 2040. And then your post-closure care for the entire site would start then. We put in an assumption of about $1 million of post-closure care during that intermittent period. That's just an assumption that you may have to close small portions of the landfill based on DEQ requirements over the coming years. And that was just an assumption that we made to add that price in. It just didn't feel like a fair assumption to be zero. And then the equipment cost over the entire life for new equipment for that landfill is put in, and then the operations and maintenance costs over that 13-year period, not 11 years. And then, as we spoke about already, the main difference here with the convenience center is just in the operations and maintenance costs in your labor, between having salaried operators versus part-time workers at the convenience center, and then separate equipment. So this was a graph that I put together just to show the differences in annual costs versus capital costs. In the transfer station scenario, a lot of your cost over the entire life is in that annual cost coming from the tipping fee and your hauling costs, with some capital costs, but the equipment for the transfer station is much cheaper. And then in the landfill scenario, you have a slight rise due to inflation, but most of your cost is coming in via capital costs, whether that's for equipment or you can see here at the end, the closure of both cells.
And in that bottom graph, we went ahead and burdened the financial analysis with the full Cell 2 development costs in 2028. Obviously, you would likely incur the costs over the years leading up to that so that you're actually ready to commence waste placement operations when the Cell 1 capacity is consumed. But for purposes of doing the 13-year comparative analysis, we burdened in that initial year with Cell 2 development costs as if they hit all in that single year.
Then an additional item, this is just showing that how the cost of the transfer station changes with that tonnage, that your hauling costs and your tipping fee are what driving that cost, and that those changes in tonnage are what is affecting the transfer station. And to the point earlier about the tipping fee, a similar graph could be made based on tipping fee changes and how that increases over time. The rest of the slides just explain each individual item in more specificity. Would you like me to go through each one, or do you have any questions for me at this moment?
Board, do you want to go through the rest of the slides, or you do? All right, if you go through the rest of the slides, please.
Okay. So first, your hauling costs and tipping fees. I kind of went through this already, but the tipping fee that's driving your transfer station costs came from the cooperative procurement with Brunswick. And so that assumption is pulled all the way through our model. And that $19.28, although it's raised for inflation year over year, we didn't change it, assuming that agreement stands true throughout that entire period. The hauling distance of 240 miles round trip, as I said earlier, you're looking about 4.5 to 5 hours to make that trip between getting there, queuing, unloading, and then making your trip back. So the additional tractors and additional drivers most likely could not do 2 trips, and they definitely could not do it in an 8-hour day. So at a minimum, it would become an overtime payment. And then an additional hiccup would be that the Brunswick landfill closes at 4 p.m. So you'd have to get your last load of trash out the gate about 1:30, which just causes an operational hazard. And then, as I stated, Thompson Trucking was the company that quoted us $710 per trip. That was quoted this year, and that's what drove that scenario up in price. So the closure costs in the transfer station scenario, so this is our cell 1, it's 13.6 acres. As I stated, we approximate about $3.7 million. So that would include the final cap, which is geosynthetic layers, a geomembrane and a geocomposite, as well as an 18-inch soil cap and the vegetation that's required to go on top of it, as well as any erosion and sediment control and stormwater management needed. And this is just an item that is required by the DEQ. Closure is required to start 6 months after final waste is placed. That's a timeline that is within the solid waste permit for the landfill. And then the post-closure care would start 1 year following final waste placement. And the post-closure care for cell 1, we've approximated at about $127,000 per year. And again, that was a estimate we made in 2022. And that post-closure care continues for 30 years. So no matter when, what scenario, post-closure and closure will have to happen at some point, and will extend for 30 years from that final closure date. And so this is the item that is in the landfill scenario, the closure of both cells. So as you can see, once you start filling cell 2, you piggyback into cell 1. And then this entire area would have to be closed, 20.3 acre footprint with the same items. And this would be what we're assuming to be 2040. And then that $1 million, we're assuming items around this bottom portion of the landfill will have reached final grade and will not be built on top of with the cell 2 waste. And there is a possibility that DEQ comes back and says those areas that have reached final grade, you're required to close that and start post-closure care on that small area. And that was a small estimate of $1 million. Does anyone have any questions as I move forward?
So could you go back a slide, please? So here you're saying post-closure care for cell 1
Correct.
would be $127,000 a year for at least 30 years. Okay. Then if we move forward, where we do a piggyback option. Final grade, why does it jump up to $1 million?
So
And
$1
That's
million-
not per year, is it?
No, it is not.
Okay.
That was the, again, that was a assumption that at some point during that 13-year period, some amount of that cell one area that reached final grade will be required to be closed. And that is an assumption based on the way that DEQ regulations are moving as of right now. And so for a portion of that land to go into post-closure, for a certain period of time, we estimated about $1 million over that 13-year period.
Over 13.
Yes, correct.
Thank you. Any other questions, board, on these? Okay.
The cost for construction of cell two, similar to the cap, although a couple of different layers. You have your geosynthetic layers, which includes a GCL, a geomembrane, and then a composite. You also have leachate pipes and stormwater management within the cell. And then the updated roads and berms that would be required around the landfill. We estimated that at about $3.25 million. And then the cell two would have to be constructed prior to final waste placement. Essentially, you would need to be ready to place waste in cell two prior to meeting your final grade in cell one. So these are our operations and maintenance costs. This is where we estimated the salaries and the labor costs. And so you can see in each different scenario how many operators are required, or we assume to be required. So the in-house trucking, as I stated, the 5 transfer station drivers, you would need to have at least 5 transfer station drivers that could haul waste from your facility to the Brunswick facility, assuming that 4 couldn't do it in a single day, and even if you did, that drivers would end up timing out over a week-long period if you had them hitting 10 or 11 hours a day. The transfer station, without the trucking, your labor goes down, but obviously we went over the $710 per trip to outsource that trucking. The landfill, so we assume with the transfer station, you still have to have 2 transfer station drivers, and you have 4 landfill operators. In each scenario, we assume that there is one kind of swing employee who can be an operator or driver and fill in as needed. And then you still have your 2 convenience site drivers for the other convenience centers within the county. And then here's where the difference is for the convenience center, that you would have part-time convenience center operators at $15 an hour versus salaried employees at the transfer station. And then just other items are equipment maintenance, fuel for that equipment, and then any monitoring and compliance that's required year over year. Do you have any additional questions?
Yes. So landfill cell 2 with transfer center, you've got 1 operator driver, and with the convenience center, you've got 1 operator driver. Tell me what this person does.
So it could be a landfill operator or a convenience site driver. So a convenience site driver is the one taking the waste to the landfill, whereas a convenience site employee is just, they're essentially just watching and making sure things are being done properly.
An attendant.
An attendant.
Well, right, but we've got convenience centers in multiple locations across the county, right?
Correct, yeah.
And we've got a driver that goes and picks up the trash and takes it to the landfill, right?
Correct.
We wouldn't have one that's just dedicated for this convenience center, would we?
You would, because this isn't your typical convenience center. It's got a big hole in the ground where things and people fall through, so it requires more attention than a typical convenience center throughout the county.
I hope people don't fall through it.
You'd be surprised what happens in convenience centers.
Interesting. Okay. Any other questions?
When
I have a question where the subject hasn't come up yet, but I'm assuming this is not the end of your presentation, right?
No, not quite.
Okay.
So the last piece that I have is just the equipment, and I've put in the prices for the equipment for each item, for each scenario, and those prices that were given to us in 2022, and then our model assumes certain life expectancies. Again, those are assumptions based on average lifespans for landfill and transfer station equipment. So 7 years for transfer station equipment, 5 years for landfill equipment. And then in the situation where we have a transfer station and a landfill, we do have additional tractors and trailers and transfer station equipment. But because of reduced waste through the transfer station, less wear and tear, we assumed a longer life expectancy for that equipment in those landfill scenarios. And then we just have our conclusions, which is mostly just reiterating the numbers that I've already showed you with some final notes. But I can take any questions that you have.
It's important to recognize that the numerical values that are yielded based on our financial modeling aren't intended to be budgetary numbers. You can appreciate the challenges, especially in everything that's been going on last couple of years in projecting specific costs that are intended to start, in some cases, in 4 to 5 years and then extend all the way out to 2040. But again, from a relative comparative analysis standpoint, the scenario in which the county would continue to be in the landfill business by developing Cell 2 and placing solid waste and addressing solid waste management from customers within the county and the landfill does appear to be less expensive relative to the costs of transferring to another facility. In this case, the sensitivity analysis that we did looked at numerous different potential receiving facilities. The Brunswick one certainly is attractive because of the low tipping fee that appears to be out of character of market value for other facilities, but can be captured through cooperative procurement because of an existing contract. However, it is not your closest potential facility. And so we looked at some sensitivity analysis of other facilities. Ryan mentioned the Maplewood landfill operated by Waste Management in Amelia County, which would be more advantageous from a proximity standpoint, but their quoted tipping fee of $35 is significant and would increase the delta, making transfer even more expensive than the Brunswick facility.
Okay.
Yeah, I think all of these items have been stated, and then the final notes are just some qualifiers that actually have already been stated throughout this presentation. So we can take any questions.
So, Mr. Bryant, you had in your staff report that there was no action necessary by the board. When are you going to be looking for action from the board?
Yeah, great question, Mr. Chairman. We do have one more small presentation from Mr. Thacker to go over some of the tasks that Public Works does. We do intend to come back with a staff recommendation to you at the first meeting in May.
Okay.
Mr. Thacker.
Thank you. So this is something Mr. Bryant asked me to add as an addendum to the presentation. This is more of a local, on-the-ground feel. Some numbers, but more a day-to-day basis, specifically addressing your concerns, Mr. Martin, transfer station versus a convenience center. So according to the presentation provided, it's about $81,000 less expensive per year to operate a convenience center at that site than a transfer station. However, the cost analysis do not include sharing a landfill employee part-time with a convenience center. So your question was, why do we need an operator? I'll get into that in the next slide. But one reason would be transporting the full tractor trailer to the landfill, because unlike a convenience center, we have a tractor trailer that has to be picked up, has to be taken to the landfill, has to be brought back on the scales, and cleaning the spilled waste from the lower level. Also, compacting the waste and servicing the site with medium and heavy-duty equipment as outlined by Ryan earlier, which is a loader, smasher, mini excavator, and a skid steer, which part-time convenience center operators cannot operate. We don't ask them to do it at any other site, and they wouldn't be able to do it at the transfer station or convenience center. The actual personnel expense difference, that is 2 full-time employees for the transfer station versus 3 to 4 part-time employees, of that $81,000 is only $22,000. So the remaining $59,000 of annual savings we would experience by turning that into a convenience center is by prolonging equipment purchases. The biggest expense of a transfer station is the floor, and that's really the thing that DEQ looks at the most. What happens to that floor? Mr. Martin, unlike a convenience center, when they come to the transfer station, it hits the floor, we have to pick it up and put it in a trailer. That floor costs about $250,000 to resurface about every 7 to 10 years. If you only use it as a convenience center, you can extend that life. Instead of 7 years, it'd be 10 years, so that would mitigate some of that cost. But finally, if that convenience center option is exercised, the landfill would still be short half an employee of the DEQ minimum personnel requirement, because we'd be sending that 4th employee that's operating at the landfill over to the convenience center to transport the trash in the tractor trailer, to operate the wheel loader, to operate the skid steer, everything that our $15 an hour convenience site attendant working part-time cannot do. Continuing the site as a transfer station allows for maximum flexibility and interchangeability. Part of the reason Public Works has been able to expand the programs we've done for the county is because we have divisions working cross-culturally with each other. Maintenance working with landfill, grounds working with landfill working with the transfer station. By isolating it simply as a convenience center, we lose that option, we lose that flexibility. Right now, our transfer station employees currently are filling in as needed at the landfill and other projects. So think about the county benefits afforded to full-time employees, vacation time, sick time, terminations, DEQ inspections, which we have quarterly, and other landfill strategies and non-landfill projects. By making it a convenience center, the interchangeability, operational efficiencies, and the economies of scale experienced at full staffing disappear. And just as a snapshot, these are the things Public Works has been able to do when at full staff, including making that keeping it as a transfer station and leaving the landfill as is. These are all done in the past 3 years, including Rose's Mill. We did the drainage issues a few years ago. We also were able to complete the Tide River Bridge last month. And we've been able to do this multitude of projects because we've been interchanging employees and staff and projects as they come up in the county. It's been a great blessing for us, and I hope for the county as well, and saving significant taxpayer funds in the process. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
So are you advocating to keep it as a hybrid, or are you leaning more
Yes,
towards the
it would be a transfer station, but we're not really transferring it out of the county or really out of the landfill itself, the landfill property. We would simply be continuing to take it a quarter mile to either sell 1 or sell 2 if it's constructed.
It would be status quo?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
But you would need more staff.
We would need staff to fulfill the permit requirements and so on. Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah. Which are not currently budgeted, correct?
We are budgeted for 4 full-time employees at the landfill. Once the transfer station opened, we split it up. We did not ask for 2 additional employees. We were told to hold the line, which we did. And after 90 days, it was determined we couldn't continue as is.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have the question I had earlier. One of the driving factors in my head when we went through this earlier to close the landfill and do this other option was the exposure with DEQ infractions and fines and penalties, et cetera. That was a big driver for me because we had those. Now, fast forward to where we are now, we've got, I think that our management and our oversight and everything is much superior than it was years ago. But how, have you all accounted for that, or how do you assess that risk factor?
We didn't account for it in terms of burdening any financial capital or operational expense with the potential for DEQ enforcement actions or remediation. So it's a risk management question, and I think from a risk management standpoint, you said it best, it's been demonstrated here recently that the Amherst County landfill can be managed and operated in a manner that doesn't incur frequent or excessive enforcement actions. So it is possible to do that. In terms of considering it from a financial standpoint, that was one of the things I pointed out, was our financial assessment was limited to some constraints or almost boundaries in a sense, and we didn't look at the cost that comes with operating a landfill when it's deemed to be out of compliance or non-conforming with regulatory activities. So admittedly, we didn't assign some sort of almost punitive cost to the landfilling for enforcement actions.
From a historical perspective, kind of looking into your crystal ball, a landfill the size of Amherst, run similarly to Amherst, how likely is it that we could go 10 years without any type of fine?
Well, as far as an actual fine or civil penalty, I do think it is feasible. It's certainly viable to operate the facility and not incur civil penalties as part of any type of enforcement actions. It does require diligence, professional expertise, but I believe it's viable. It's been proven in the Commonwealth to do that. Typically having a good relationship with the regulatory agency and a high degree of diligence at the facility when things are documented or noted to be a potential problem, addressing them in a timely manner reduces the financial impact as that severity is mitigated.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Wait, Mr. Ayers? Mr. Pugh?
No, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, moving on to the VDOT Rural Rustic 6-Year Road Plan. Please come tell us about Windy Ridge.
Good afternoon. It's not a whole lot to tell. We're following through with our, with our priorities as outlined by the board. If you look up on the screen, that package, that's really one of the main lists we keep. This is not the 6-year plan. This is just a priority list of unpaved roads that citizens have asked that their roads be put on and prioritized. This is the list that we use to pull projects to go into the 6-year plan. That's what that list is for, and we keep a pretty good record of that list. Really, as far as any actions from the board this year, last year you all prioritized each and every project on there. This priority list is the same as it was last year, with the exception of the projects that we pulled off and put into the formal 6-year construction plan. So that's what we do. And we really don't need, we can certainly add projects if you have constituents that have asked for that road to be paved. We can add it to this list, but as far as redoing these priorities, unless the board wants to redo these priorities, we've got enough prioritized probably to last us a couple of years. A couple of 6-year plan revisions. So there's nothing to say that we can't, you can prioritize them if you want to, but we don't have to. And usually what happens when a board member gives myself or Jeremy a call, we try to add it to this list, keep a rough draft. And then when it comes times to formalize it, we put it on here. So that is what that list right there is. That's our rural rustic priority list. You also have the current draft of the proposed six-year plan for FY '24 through FY '29. And unfortunately, our allocations are going down for unpaid roads. In FY last year, we received $336,000 of unpaid road funds for Amherst County. Estimated FY '24 is going down to 463 in FY '24. And then hovering in FY '25, they'll be estimated to be around 458. And the last 4 years of the plan, they dropped down to about $350,000. Now, these are out years, so, you know, it's not money until you get it and it's spent. So hopefully these allocations will go back up, but these are our projected allocations for the next 6 years. And all of the roads that were added to the six-year plan this year, they came, like I said, they came off this list right here from previous years. So, that is kind of a brief overview of the plan. So what kind of questions can I answer for anybody?
You just had multiple citizens come up, and you heard them, and say, hey, you know, we've been talking to boards, obviously past boards too, for 20 years about getting Windy Ridge Road paved.
Yeah, I remember when Windy Ridge was put on that list, and it's,
Okay,
and it's
so,
worked its way
yeah,
out of that list and is currently in the six-year plan.
right. And I think what they're asking, and what I'd like to know, is when does VDOT anticipate paving the road?
When do we anticipate paving the road? In the draft of the plan, it received $10,000 funding last year. In FY '24, which is July 1, it will receive $217,000, and we'll finish financing it in FY '25. Unless they've changed our requirements for starting construction, we should be able to start that road after July 1
Of
construction.
this year?
This year.
Yes.
Okay.
And then finish it when?
Oh, we'll finish it this year.
Okay, I just heard you say 2025, and that
Well, I
made
mean,
me pause.
that's the funding part of it, Ms. Tucker. That's the funding part of it. Yeah.
So does that answer, well, anyway,
So they start. July 1st, we're starting to pave our road this year, 2023.
yeah, let's not get back and forth, but what I just heard you say is that the money would be available to pave Windy Ridge Road July 1 of this year, which is
Yes,
fiscal year
it received $10,000 funding. Last year.
Bulk of the money's there this
And
year.
it's going to get an additional $217,000 this year. And that still doesn't finish financing it, but, yeah, it is, yeah, we should be able to start that. And I want, let me verify one thing, Mr. Martin, to make sure this hasn't changed. Typically in the past, under our programming guidelines, if you fund a project in 1 year, if you start funding in 1 year, and you're gonna have it funded throughout the rest of your plan, you can start construction, even though it's not fully financed. Let me verify that before I say, yes, definitely, this will happen. Because, folks, things change, and I don't wanna, I know these folks are anxious, and I don't blame them, I'd be anxious too. I wanna make very clear, sure that if I tell them that's what's gonna
Well,
happen.
when do you think you can find that out?
I'll find out tomorrow.
Okay, so I guess what I'm asking is can you find that out? And if the money is available July 1 and you can move forward in paving it, just because it's available July 1 doesn't mean that it is going to start July 1. So where within that next year would
Well-
you be thinking about doing the work?
Right now, our number one priority in Amherst County is to construct Beverly Town. That is our number one priority. Windy Ridge is second, the remainder of Weir's Gap. You know, we have worked toward constructing, and I think I'm right on, I think that's still correct, that we can start Windy Ridge this year and get it built. Because our 4 projects in Amherst County that we want to build this year were Beverly Town, Windy Ridge, finish Weir's Gap, and Kentmore Farm Road. We have done the preliminary engineering, we've done the environmental clearances to build these roads this year. But before I say absolutely, let me confirm that, because I don't want to misspeak and certainly
All
lead
right.
these folks on.
So a little unorthodox, but what I would like to say to those of you who came and spoke is, we heard you, I heard you, okay? We're asking Mr. Brown, as you can see, we're putting him on some spots right now. I'm asking you to go back, look into it, get with Mr. Bryant tomorrow and let him know, and then give him a day. So if you would call Thursday to Mr. Bryant and say, hey, what did you find out? All right? Mr. Bryant's very diligent, and if you don't get an acceptable answer, please give me a call or please come back here at the next board meeting. Okay? I can't let you speak right now, Mr. Page, but if you want to wait till citizen comment, that'd be great.
Well, excuse me, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
I will, in light of the comments made about the condition of Windy Ridge, I will look at that road. I can't do it this afternoon because I gotta go to Campbell board meeting here at 6 o'clock. But either I or one of my assistants will look at that road, and we will perform any needed maintenance as far as potholes and standing water.
Okay. So what do you need from us?
We are asking you to send this to a public hearing at the May meeting. And we'll advertise as such.
Is there any other, I'm sorry, is there any other questions for Mr. Brown?
I do have a question.
Okay, I'm
When I
sorry.
was looking at Indian Creek Road, which it's not nearly as bad as what these people are going through, so I'm not even saying that, but it is dangerous. I've been advocating for that one for several years. Somebody's gonna fall in the creek, and it's a very steep drop-off because the road it's just eroded that badly. I thought that we had moved up the list, and now it doesn't appear like we've moved any. What's the status?
I mean, as we talked about last year, Ms. Tucker, the board sets priority, and I follow the priorities set by this board.
I don't remember us being that far down.
See,
I think part of the
last year-
confusion is,
Last year, you were on this list.
correct, it was on the rural rustic list. So this is the list we prioritized. They get moved up as the VDOT gets funding. It moves from the rural rustic list up to the 6-year plan. So it has moved up from this list to the 6-year plan. So it's actually in the plan.
It's actually in the plan and receiving funding. This is just a holding list where you all set priority.
So as projects move off of this list, these move on to that
Yes,
list.
this is a holding list where we decide which road you decide which road you want us to bid. They come off this list, they're gonna be actually 6-year secondary road construction.
Up later, Mr. Bryant.
All right. Mr. Wade, any questions? Mr. Ayers?
No, sir.
Mr. Pugh?
No, sir.
All right. Is there a motion?
I'll move that the board direct staff to schedule the public hearing on May 16th.
All right, motion on the floor by Mr. Wade. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. I vote aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Brown. Brian, anxiously await your call tomorrow. All right, revocation of special exception permit, that would be Mr. Tyler Creasy.
Chairman, Board, how are y'all today? Just to jog your memory, give me 1 second. I would like to pull up the property on the county's GIS system. So at your previous board meeting, you had directed staff to provide a progress update on special exception 2020-380. This special exception was reviewed by the Planning Commission in September of 2020 and then approved by you all with conditions in October of 2020. In the memo before you, there's a list of timeline of approvals. I'm not going to go over the conditions of the special exception permit except for a couple because that relates to the issue at hand. One of them is that outdoor storage, no miscellaneous items shall be stored outside other than the operative and licensed trucks. Mr. Waldron, if you drive by the property, there are multiple inoperable vehicles that he uses to store supplies. As he says, staff has not been inside of them. He says he stores supplies, and there's also a trailer out there and some other miscellaneous items. And in addition to that, it does appear that the site has been used as a trucking operation, and therefore the landscaping has not been in place, and nor none of the other conditions per that special exception. So going off of this memo, you will see that in the inspection timeline, Mr. Waldron started off in March of 2021 after his site plan approval. He started off very hot, steadfast. He got his stormwater basin in on the left-hand side of the property and was moving forward greatly. And this was March time. And then towards the end of April, getting into the summer months, the site went completely dormant. And due for other reasons, Mr. Waldron said it was due to financial troubles. You'll notice in the memo, staff's really only means of enforcement for a special exception and even erosion and sediment control enforcement are civil penalties. And due to the lack of finances and why this site has not been developed, staff didn't really seem it plausible to deem civil penalties upon this person. So therefore, we contact him at least monthly, asking him for progress updates. We have been doing that, and you can see in here there's a email from Mr. Bryant to myself for a conversation with Mr. Waldron. Said he would give us updates continuously over the next 2 weeks. The only time we get them, of course, when we call him. That being said, I do believe Mr. Waldron means well and wants to get it done, but I'm not sure if he will. So therefore, that's why staff has developed this memo for you all to help you in your decision-making process. In the item summary, there was a recommended motion for you to draft a resolution to revoke special exception 2020-380. And I will leave it at that. Are there any questions for staff?
Questions for staff? All right. Thank you, Mr. Creasy. I believe I'm the one that asked for this. I can say that I believe that the gentleman means well also, yet if he meant, he's also using it, and he's using it in direct violation of what we approved. So, you know, it's been almost 3 years, and, you know, we gave him special approval to do a certain thing, and he has not carried forward. And I have watched the site erode. I have watched the entrances that they have tried to put in blow out. I can't believe that VDOT has continued to allow this. So, you know, it was never intended to be you know, inoperative vehicles on the site. It was a trucking facility, and that is not what has occurred. So I would make the motion that we direct staff to prepare a resolution that revokes special exception 2020-380 and schedule a public hearing for the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. There's a motion on the floor. Is there discussion on that motion? If there's no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, moving on, County Administrator's Report.
Yes, sir. The first item is the board's being asked to appoint a member to the Building Appeals Board. We received a letter from Kenneth Campbell, who is our former building official. That term expires April the 30th, 2023. Mr. Campbell submitted a letter to us on March the 11th expressing his interest. That's found in your packet. So we've given you 3 recommended motions in your packet. What's your pleasure?
Board?
Mr. Martin, I would recommend that, make a motion, we reappoint Mr. Campbell as an at-large representative, Building Appeals Board.
Wholeheartedly agree. Is there any discussion on Ms. Tucker's motion? All right, if not, all those in favor of appointing Mr. Campbell signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. Congratulations, Mr. Campbell. All right, next one.
Okay, the next item is an at-large member to the Agricultural Committee. This was advertised also in the New Era Progress. Initially, we didn't receive any interest letters. However, Mr. Ed Sale, who is a member of the Ag Committee, did write an email that's also in your packet. We have 3 recommended motions for you in the package if you would like to appoint Mr. Sale back to that board.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we appoint Mr. Ed Sale to serve a 3-year term.
All right, motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. Is there any discussion? Not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye.
Aye.
All right, very good. Project status report.
Okay, finally, I've updated the project status report, Excel spreadsheet that is found in your packet. Do you have any specific questions for me that you'd like to ask?
Questions for Mr. Bryant? All right. All right. Moving on, County Attorney's report.
I have nothing, sir.
Thank you. All right, we will go back to citizen comment. Is there anyone that would like to address the board? Everybody left. Okay. All right. Moving on to matters from members of the Board of Supervisors. Ms. Tucker?
I don't have anything.
Mr. Ayers?
2 things. I'd like to thank Mr. Wade for making that motion on that development down there in your district. I think that over the next several years will be a great thing, especially for the seniors of our community, and I appreciate it, and board, I appreciate you all's support in that motion. I'd also like to make it known today that I will not be seeking reelection this year, that I will complete my term through December, and it's been great to serve in this capacity for the last 2 terms. Will be 8 years when I'm done, and I just want to make that publicly known today. With that said, thank all of you.
Thank you. Mr. Pugh?
I have nothing other than to thank Mr. Ayers for his time and service on the board. We appreciate everything he's done and wish him the best of luck in his future endeavors.
Thank you, Mr.
Absolutely.
Pugh.
Mr. Wade?
I just want to, again, thank you for, I know our time's been short together, but
I've enjoyed it,
working with you. So, best wishes to you.
and same to each of you all.
But that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, you're not done yet, so we still got you.
Yeah, got a few more
Few
months.
more months, all right. I have nothing. All right, so, next thing on the agenda is a closed session. Is there a, let's see it. Is there a motion?
Yes, sir.
All right, so, I'd make a motion for a closed session pursuant to section 2-2, 3711A1 for the purpose of discussing and considering prospective candidates for employment as county administrator. All All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I vote aye. All right, you want me to just call you back, Mr. Pugh?
That'd be
Is
great.
that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, we are in closed session.
Okay, good. I'm not planning on it.
Mr. Ayers. We're gonna miss having you up here long term.
Well,
It's been great.
Jeremy, it's definitely